There is a moment in Season 6 of The Amazing World of Gumball that I have thought about genuinely more times than I probably should. It is a quiet moment. It does not announce itself. There is no dramatic music swell or sudden zoom. Banana Barbara just finishes one of her paintings. She wipes the brush slowly across the edge of the palette, the way people do when they are so deep in their own work they have stopped being aware of anything beyond the canvas. She lifts the finished painting and hangs it on the wall of her garage, right alongside dozens of others that cover every inch of the space from floor to ceiling. These vivid, strange, apparently chaotic images stacked and layered and crowded together like the inside of a very specific kind of mind. And then she sees something in the painting she just completed, and a shadow in the background. A figure standing right behind where she is sitting in the image. Her posture changes. Something subtle shifts in her expression. She turns around slowly, and Rob is there. He takes her. The screen goes black. Now, what gets me about that scene is not the kidnapping itself. It is not even the creepiness of Rob appearing right behind her, having somehow known she would be there, having positioned himself in her blind spot. What gets me is the wall of paintings, because every single one of them, every strange vision this apparently absent-minded banana had daubed in colors across canvas after canvas and hung in her garage, had already come true by the time we are watching this moment. Every single one had materialized in Elmore exactly as she painted it, without exception, without fail. A woman who gets lost inside Christmas stockings and wanders uninvited into Japanese karaoke videos and wears a bow on her head specifically to prevent herself from literally falling apart, has been quietly, faithfully, and with absolute accuracy documenting the entire future of her world from inside a garage that nobody takes seriously. She has been the Oracle of Elmore this whole time, and everyone dismissed her as a background character with a quirky aesthetic. And then she looks at her last canvas, the one she just completed. And it is nothing. Not abstract, not obscure, not hard to interpret. Nothing. Static. The visual representation of a dead signal, of a broadcast that has stopped transmitting. She says something I keep returning to. And I will tell you right now, it is the most unsettling line I have ever heard in a children's cartoon on Cartoon Network. She says it in a flat, quiet voice, delivered with the kind of eerie calm that comes from someone who has fully accepted a truth too large to fight. She says, "There is no future." That is the line. A banana in a brightly colored animated comedy series aimed primarily at children just looked at all possible tomorrows and described them as empty, as nothing, as the signal that has stopped. That line is not a throwaway moment of dark humor. It is not the show being edgy for its own sake. It is the key that opens everything. Because once you have that line sitting in your head, once you have sat with what it actually means, every other dark thread in this show starts connecting to it. And you realize that the Amazing World of Gumball was building toward this understanding across its entire run. Every strange piece of lore, every meta-episode, every character whose backstory just barely peeks through the surface of the comedy, every moment where something slightly wrong happens and nobody quite acknowledges it, all of it is connected. All of it is part of the same statement about what fictional existence actually costs. Tonight, we are going to go through all of it. Every major theory, every character whose story is darker than you probably realized, every detail the show embedded in plain sight that only makes sense when you have the right frame for it. We are going to talk about what the Amazing World of Gumball was actually saying underneath all that color and chaos and comedy, now to anyone patient enough to listen for it. So if you are settling in right now, good. That is exactly where you should be. Get comfortable. Let the room be quiet. Pull the blankets up if you want them. This is the kind of conversation that feels different in the dark. Because some of what we are covering tonight is not scary in the way a horror film is scary. It is scary in the quieter, more persistent way. The kind that does not spike your heart rate in the moment, but stays with you afterward, sitting in the back of your mind while you're trying to fall asleep. The kind that asks you questions you did not know you had. Before we go anywhere specific, I want to spend time on something that most discussions of this show skip past, which is the origin story, where this show actually came from. But because understanding how the Amazing World of Gumball was created is not just interesting context, it is a mirror image of the mythology the show went on to build. The story of how this world was made and the story the world tells about itself are the same story, told from different angles. Ben Buckley is a French-born British animator. He grew up in Paris, trained at EMCA in Angoulême, moved to London, spent years at a commercial animation studio called Studio AKA, and then in 2007 ended up at Cartoon Network Development Studio Europe in London. His job there was to help other people pitch their shows, to the network. He would develop sample characters, help build worlds, assist in the preparation of creative pitches. And during those years, he accumulated something that would turn out to matter enormously. He had spent years in commercial animation, creating characters for advertising pitches that never went anywhere. Designed a character for a product brief, the client passed, the character went in a drawer. Built a world for a concept pitch, the pitch failed, the world got shelved. He had dozens of these. Little drawings of things that were imagined into existence and then declared unnecessary. Characters that were given shape and color and intention and then told they were not enough. When the studio told its employees to pitch their own show ideas, Buckley looked at all those abandoned characters and had the thought that ended up changing animated television. What if they were the show? What if he took every rejected, unwanted, never used character he had ever created and gave them a place to exist together? His original pitch was for a show about rejected cartoon characters attending a remedial school. Not a school where they would be fixed, just a school where they could be. A home for the discarded. The producers told him the concept was too sad. So he revised it into something more cheerful, a family sitcom, a story about a middle school kid and his chaotic household. But the DNA of the original idea did not go anywhere. It is still in every frame of the show. Every character in Elmore is, at the cellular level, a reject. They were made for other purposes and ended up here because nowhere else took them. Buckley named the family after his own relatives. Nicole for his mother, Richard for his father, Anais for his sister. He put his own family inside a world made of everything nobody wanted. He named the family Watterson after Bill Watterson, the creator of Calvin and Hobbes, a man who made one of the most beloved and culturally significant comic strips in American history, and then simply stopped. Who walked away from enormous fame and commercial opportunity because he wanted to protect the integrity of what he had created. Who refused to license his characters, refused to let anyone else write them, and who, when he felt the story was finished, ended it. Chose obscurity over compromise. Let his creation rest rather than watch it be hollowed out by the machinery of commerce. The Wattersons of Elmore, named after this man, live in a world where stopping means being consumed by the void, where the choice Bill Watterson made to let a beloved thing end on its own terms would be equivalent to annihilation. That is not a coincidence. That is the show embedding its deepest theme into its own naming conventions before a single episode was written. So if you're settling in right now, that is exactly where you should be. Get comfortable. Maybe pull the blankets a little higher. This is the kind of conversation that goes better in the dark, because some of what we're going to cover tonight isn't scary in the way a horror film is scary. It's scary in the quieter way, the way that makes you feel, not in your stomach, but somewhere further back, somewhere you don't have a name for. The show was created by a man named Ben Buckley. He is French-born, grew up in Paris, trained in animation, moved to London, and eventually ended up working at Cartoon Network Development Studio Europe in 2007. His job there was to help other people pitch their shows to the network. He would help develop characters, help build worlds, sit in on creative meetings, and in that role, over those years, he accumulated something. He had been working in commercial animation before that, at a studio called Studio AKA, making characters for advertising pitches that never went anywhere. Characters that were designed, developed, given personality and shape and intention, and then quietly shelved. When the client passed, or the pitch fell flat. Dozens of them. Little drawings of creatures and people and strange things that never got to be anything. When the Cartoon Network studio told its employees to start pitching their own ideas, Buckley looked at all those abandoned characters and had a thought. What if they were the show? What if he took every rejected, unwanted, never used character he had ever made and gave them a home? His original pitch was literally a show about rejected cartoon characters attending a remedial school. A school for the discarded, a story about the ones nobody wanted. The producer said the concept was too sad, so he revised it into a family sitcom. But here's the thing that no revision could ever change. The DNA was still there. Every character in Elmore, on some deep and cellular level, is a reject. They were built for other purposes. They ended up here because nowhere else would take them. Bacalé even named the family after people from his own life. Nicole is his mother, Richard is his father, Anais is his sister. He put his own family inside a world made from the discarded. He named the family Watterson after Bill Watterson, the reclusive genius who created Calvin and Hobbes and then walked away from it at the height of its cultural power, refusing to merchandise his characters or let anyone else write them, choosing obscurity over compromise. A man who proved that the greatest act of creative love is sometimes letting something rest rather than watching it be hollowed out. The Wattersons of Elmore, named after a man who chose to stop, live in a world where stopping means being swallowed by the void. The irony of that naming is not an accident. It could not be an accident. And I want you to hold that image with you as we go through everything tonight. A show built by a man who spent years making characters nobody wanted, gathered them all together, named them after his family, and a man who chose silence over survival. And then built an entire mythology around the terror of being forgotten, the terror of not being enough, the terror of the static. If you're watching this right now, wherever you are, whether it is 2 in the afternoon and the sun is bright and everything feels fine, or whether it is late and the room is dark and the world outside has gone quiet, I would love to know. Drop a comment, tell me the time, tell me where you are in the world. There is something I find genuinely meaningful about knowing who is here for this kind of conversation and when they are having it, because the theories we are going to talk about tonight land differently depending on the hour. I promise you will understand why I say that before we are finished. And if you are not subscribed yet, now would be a wonderful time. Every subscription is a small act of keeping this channel alive, and the weight of that phrase will mean something very specific once we have talked about the void. Let us begin. Part 1. The world they built and what it cost to live there. Let us start from the beginning. Not Gumball's beginning, not the first episode, but the beginning of the world itself. Because before we can talk about any individual character or theory, we need to understand the fundamental rules of Elmore. What it actually is, how it works. Because once you understand the rules, everything else becomes not just darker, but coherent. It stops feeling like a series of unsettling coincidences and starts feeling like a deliberate and meticulously constructed vision of what existence really costs. Elmore is a town. On the surface, it looks like a suburb, recognizable and lived in, because the backgrounds of the show are real photographs of real places, many of them in and around London, where the show was produced at Cartoon Network Development Studio Europe. Real streets, real buildings, real parks and parking lots and shopping centers photographed and laid flat as the world these characters inhabit. And into that photographic reality, Ben Bacalé and his team placed characters drawn in every animation style imaginable. 2-dimensional hand-drawn characters, 3-dimensional computer-generated characters, stop-motion figures, puppets, a live-action chin filmed upside down. Characters from different eras of animation, rendered in different techniques, occupying the same physical space, bumping into each other at the bus stop and sitting next to each other in class. Bacalé has spoken in interviews about being influenced by Who Framed Roger Rabbit, about wanting Elmore to feel so real that children would ask their parents to go there on holiday. He wanted them to believe it existed. And there is something achingly beautiful about that intention. He wanted rejected characters to have a home so real, it felt like they could actually be in it. But here is what that aesthetic choice creates, thematically. Every character in Elmore is a visual reminder that they do not quite fit. Gumball does not look like Darwin. Darwin does not look like Penny. Penny does not look like Tina Rex. None of them look like the photographic world beneath their feet. They are perpetually slightly wrong for the environment they inhabit. Fish out of water, except the fish grew legs and is attending middle school. The visual dissonance is constant, and it is not accidental. It mirrors exactly what the show tells us is true about every character's existential situation. They are all here because they ended up here, not because this world was built for them specifically. They are guests in their own reality, and that reality has rules. Elmore has an operating system, and once you understand how it works, the comedy stops being funny in the simple way and becomes funny in a much more complicated way. The most important rule is this: Elmore maintains a strict internal quality control. The universe, however you want to conceptualize it, some governing force that keeps the world coherent and functioning, is constantly evaluating everything in it. People, objects, inventions, fashion trends, prototypes, ideas, and anything that fails the evaluation, on anything the universe determines is a mistake or a bore or simply no longer useful, gets removed. Not archived, not set aside, removed. Sent to a place called The Void. The Void is introduced in Season 3 in an episode titled, appropriately, The Void. Gumball and Darwin realize their classmate Molly has disappeared. Not just from school, from everyone's memory. They are the only ones who notice she is gone, and even they can barely remember her. The investigation leads them to discover a dimension made of television static, a space between spaces where the universe deposits everything it considers an error. Dated fads, failed products, outdated characters, things nobody wanted anymore. Molly was sent there because the universe decided she was too uninteresting to exist, too flat, not enough story. She was a mistake. As in, mistakes get corrected. The show delivers this information with a cheerful, absurdist energy because that is how the Amazing World of Gumball delivers everything. But stop the comedy for a second and look at what it is actually saying. In this world, your right to exist is conditional. It depends on whether you are interesting enough, narratively useful enough, entertaining enough to justify the space you take up. If you are not, you do not simply have a bad day. You cease to be, and everyone who knew you forgets that you were ever there. Your friends forget you. Your family forgets you. The physical evidence of your existence is smoothed away, the universe folding space over the hole you left. And nobody notices the seams. That is canon. Not a fan theory, not an implication. But the show explicitly tells us this is how Elmore works and then plays it for comedy, which is somehow darker than if it had played it for tragedy. Because comedy demands that you laugh at something true. The premise only works as a joke if some part of you recognizes it. And it is not just Elmore. The Void is not some local phenomenon. It is a fundamental law of the universe these characters inhabit. A cosmic mechanism for quality control. Which means every single character in this show, every person walking down the street, every student in Miss Simeon's classroom, every background figure carrying a bag of groceries or sitting on a bench, exists only because the universe has not yet decided that they are a mistake. They are all on a perpetual evaluation. They are all, in some way they may not consciously know, performing. This is the hidden heartbeat of the show. Everything that happens in Elmore, the constant chaos, the relentless comedy, the inability of any character to have a quiet day without something catastrophic occurring, is not just episodic structure. It is survival. A world where stasis means deletion forces its inhabitants to keep generating story. Keep being interesting. Keep being worth watching. The comedy is not incidental to the horror. The comedy is the horror, expressed differently. Now, there is another dimension to this that we will return to throughout tonight, which is the meta layer. The show is not just a world with an internal logic about interesting characters surviving. The show is explicitly, repeatedly, and increasingly aware that it is a television show. Characters break the fourth wall. That reality glitches when the broadcast signal degrades. A device called the Universal Remote can pause and rewind and fast-forward the actual episode. Rob explicitly tells Gumball that none of this is real. The finale sees a character attempting to turn cartoon figures into real humans so they can escape to, quote, the other place, presumably our world. There is a direct line between the show's internal mythology and its meta-awareness. The Void is cancellation. The universe's quality control is the network's ratings calculation. The characters performing to stay relevant is literally what television characters do every episode. What keeps them alive is us watching. And the Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball, the revival series that released in 2025, made this official canon. An episode called The Rewrite establishes directly that the Void will destroy Elmore when the series is canceled. Or if the main characters discover that they are fictional, the awareness kills them. The truth destroys the world. And somehow, all of this started as a show about a blue cat going to middle school. Part 2. Rob, the nobody who knew everything. If you want to understand the amazing world of Gumball, you start with Rob. Not because he is the protagonist, he is very specifically not the protagonist, but because his story is the frame that holds all the other stories inside it. Once you understand what happened to Rob, you understand the rules of Elmore at their most naked. And once you understand the rules at their most naked, every other character's tragedy becomes legible in a way it was not before. Rob starts the show as nothing. I mean that in the most literal possible sense. In seasons 1 and 2, he is a background character, a tall, blue, one-eyed figure who appears in crowd scenes at Elmore Junior High. He has no storyline, no family, no development, no reason to be there beyond filling space. The show acknowledged this directly. He was so forgettable that even the main characters, when they ran into him in Season 2's episode The Pony, and he greeted them warmly by name, could not remember who he was. They could not recall his name. They kicked him down a manhole and walked on. And the show played this as a quick throwaway joke. It was not a throwaway joke. In Season 3, Gumball, Darwin, and Mr. Small enter the Void to rescue their classmate Molly. And while they are navigating this dimension of television static and searching for the girl everyone forgot, Rob is there too. He can be seen in the background. He watches them. He tries to get their attention. He reaches out. And Gumball and Darwin walk right past him. They do not see him. They rescue Molly. They get back to the van. They start to leave. And at the last possible second, Rob grabs onto the back of the van. He holds on. He is trying to get out. He has been in this dimension of cosmic deletion for long enough, and here is his chance. The Void fights back. It tears at him as he escapes. It distorts him. By the time he makes it back to the real world, his body is permanently altered, polygonal, glitchy, static running across his skin, his head misshapen into something that looks like a cracked television screen. He has been physically marked by the place that tried to erase him. He hides in the Watterson's basement for months, amnesiac, not knowing who he is or what happened to him. When Gumball and Darwin find him, he tells them something that is not self-pity. It is a statement of fact. He says, "I am a nobody. I have no place in this world." He is correct. The universe looked at him and decided he was not enough. He has the scar to prove it. And here is where Gumball and Darwin, in their well-meaning, deeply thoughtless way, make everything worse. They try to help him. They point out that every positive role in Elmore is already occupied. The hero is Gumball. The loyal companion is Darwin. The love interest is Penny. The class clown is Banana Joe. Every role is spoken for. The only vacancy, that's the only space left in the narrative architecture of this world, is the villain. And Rob, desperate for any identity, any reason to continue existing, takes it. He becomes Gumball's nemesis. Not because he is evil, not because he wants to be the bad guy, but because the only alternative is the Void. He chooses a role he did not want over the oblivion he already survived. There is a conversation in Season 5's The Disaster that I think is one of the most quietly devastating exchanges in the show's history. Rob has the universal remote. He has the power to manipulate reality, to pause and rewind the episode itself, to fundamentally control the narrative. And he uses that moment of absolute power not to be triumphant, but to be honest. He tells Gumball that he never wanted this. He did not want to be the villain. He wanted to be the cute sidekick, the lovable supporting character who gets his own plush toy and eventually, maybe, a spin-off. He wanted to matter to people. He wanted someone to look forward to seeing him. But in Gumball's Amazing World, the protagonist gets everything and everyone else is supporting cast. And Rob decided the only way to escape that hierarchy was to remove the protagonist. I want to be very clear about something. Rob is not wrong about any of this. He is right that the world revolves around Gumball. He is right that other characters exist primarily to serve Gumball's story. He is right that the system is rigged in the protagonist's favor. The show knows this. The show is telling you this on purpose, through Rob's mouth, with full authorial awareness. Rob is a character who has become conscious of his own fictionality and discovered that his fictional existence was specifically designed to be insignificant. He is screaming into the void about the injustice of it, literally, and the void screamed back. Season 6 takes Rob's arc somewhere few children's shows have ever gone. He figures something out that nobody else in Elmore knows. He figures out what the void actually is. Not just a repository for mistakes, not just a cosmic garbage bin. He figures out that it is the end. If the show stops, if the signal dies, if whatever force keeps Elmore alive decides it is done, the void consumes everything. Every character, every building, every memory. The world simply ceases to exist. And Rob, crucially, knows this is coming. So what does he do? He tries to save everyone. In the Inquisition, the Season 6 finale, Rob disguises himself as a school superintendent. He infiltrates the school system. And he begins systematically attempting to transform every student, every teacher, every character he can reach into a live-action human being. He wants to turn them real. Because if they are real people, actual humans, they might be able to survive in the other place, our world, when Elmore is destroyed. He is trying to smuggle an entire cartoon cast into reality. Gumball and Darwin stop him. Of course they do. They do not understand what he is trying to do. They cannot understand it because they do not know what he knows. He is the villain. That is his role. So they fight him and they win and they celebrate. And as they celebrate, the ground cracks. Static seeps through. The void has arrived. Rob stands in the hallway of Elmore Junior High as reality begins to dissolve around him and he falls. The screen freeze frames on him mid-fall. Static. Credits. For years, that was how the show ended. A character who spent his entire arc trying to warn everyone, trying to save them, being the only person who understood what was coming, falls into oblivion while the people he was trying to protect stand around confused. The revival series, The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball, which began streaming in July 2025 and has since been renewed for additional seasons, eventually addressed this in the episode called The Rewrite. Rob was saved from the void by the Shady Man, the mysterious van shopkeeper who had always operated at the edges of Elmore's narrative. But the Shady Man is himself one of the only other characters aware that the world is fictional. He explains to Rob that his new purpose is to protect Elmore, to be the invisible guardian, to keep Gumball and Darwin from discovering the truth about the world, because if they find out they are fictional, the void returns. The awareness itself is the trigger. In the rewrite, Rob spends an episode trying to prevent Gumball and Darwin from following a trail of plot holes that would lead them to that discovery. He manipulates the episode around them. He rewrites the story in real time. And in the end, he falls into the void again, deliberately to seal the gap. The Shady Man pulls him out, and they drive away together, leaving Elmore intact, leaving everyone safe, leaving no one knowing what just happened. Rob began as nothing. He was declared worthless by his own universe. He was physically deformed, trying to escape deletion. He was psychologically cornered into becoming the villain. He tried to destroy the protagonist, then tried to save the world, failed publicly, fell into oblivion, was rescued, and became an invisible guardian whose heroism no one will ever acknowledge. He became the most important character in a show that was built on the premise that he did not matter. And he achieved that importance by accepting, completely and permanently, that he will never be seen doing it. He goes from nobody to villain to prophet to martyr to guardian. And through all of it, the one constant is that nobody understands him. The character who was defined by being forgotten chose, in the end, to be forgotten again. Not because he had to, because it was the right thing to do. That is the most human arc in a show full of talking animals, and it is the arc that belongs to a one-eyed Cyclops teenager who nobody could remember the name of. Part 3. The Void as the End of Everything We Love. We have talked about what the void is mechanically. Now let us talk about what it means. There is a reading of the void that is almost unbearably straightforward once you see it. The void is cancellation, not metaphorically, not as a loose analogy. In the most direct possible sense, the void is what happens when a television show stops being watched, when the audience turns away, when the ratings fall below the threshold, when the network decides the investment is no longer returning value. The void is the creative death that every fictional world faces eventually. And the characters of The Amazing World of Gumball live in its shadow in a way that no amount of colorful animation can fully obscure. Think about what the void actually does. It erases things that are no longer relevant. It removes what has become a mistake. It makes everyone forget that the erased thing ever existed. It smooths the world back over until there is no trace of what was removed. This is precisely what happens to canceled television shows. The characters stop existing in any meaningful sense. People who love them forget the details. The cultural conversation moves on. The show's absence is folded into the landscape of entertainment history, and eventually the gap is invisible. The show understands this. The show is about this. Every detail of the void's design confirms it. The void is made of television static. Yeah, which is what you see when the broadcast fails. The universal remote, the device that gives Rob his power, controls reality the same way a television remote controls programming. You can rewind. You can fast forward, you can pause, you can change the channel. You can, with the right button, eject someone from existence entirely. The in-universe physics of Elmore are television physics. The metaphor is not hiding. And the show confirmed all of this officially in the rewrite. The void will destroy Elmore when the series is canceled, or if the characters discover they are fictional. Both of these conditions are, at their core, the same thing. Cancellation ends the fiction. The characters discovering their fictionality also ends the fiction, because the moment a character truly knows they are a character, that the comfortable illusion of their world collapses. The story cannot survive its own awareness. This is why Rob's awareness is both his greatest gift and his most terrible burden. He is the only one who sees clearly. He is the only one who understands the actual stakes. And that understanding cannot save him. It cannot save anyone. Because spreading the knowledge would only accelerate the destruction it was meant to prevent. Banana Barbara's paintings exist in this context as something deeply haunting. Every painting she makes comes true. Every vision she has translated into color on canvas materializes in Elmore, exactly as she depicted it. The woman everyone dismisses as eccentric, the woman who wears a bow on her head to keep herself from falling apart, who ended up this way after a workplace burnout destroyed the version of her that was competent and present, has been faithfully documenting the future of her world from inside her garage. She is the oracle who paid for her prophecy with her sanity. And when she looks at the future, the last canvas she fills before everything changes, it is nothing. Static. No image, no shape, no story. She reports this the only way she knows how. She says there is no future. She is not wrong. She is not catastrophizing. She is simply painting what she sees. And what she sees at the end of everything is television static. The signal dying. The broadcast ending. The world returning to the white noise from which all stories come and to which all stories ultimately return. While there are smaller echoes of the void scattered throughout the show that become much more significant once you are looking for them. In Season 4's The Signal, reality begins to glitch. Gumball and Darwin's conversation keeps skipping. Scenes cut forward without warning. The world stutters like a bad satellite connection. Gumball notices. He feels it. The episode is presented as exactly what it looks like. A television broadcast degrading. Not a story about something that causes this. Not a villain who is responsible, just the signal. Failing. And Gumball and Darwin nearly, very nearly, realize what this means. They are close to saying the words out loud. The episode cuts them off before they can. The world itself intervenes to prevent the truth from being spoken. This was not random. The wonderfully weird world of Gumball confirmed it. By the moment of discovery is the trigger. The awareness is the weapon that kills. So the show, across years of episodes, was maintaining a protective ignorance for its own characters. Letting them feel the glitch. Letting them sense that something was wrong. but never letting them arrive at the conclusion. Because if they do, everything ends. That is an extraordinary thing for a piece of entertainment to do. To construct a world where the central character's safety depends on them not understanding the show they're in. To put existential peril behind the veil of ordinary middle school drama. To make every happy moment carry the faint charge of something that must never be examined too closely. The void is always close. The static is always one bad signal away. And every character in Elmore has been dancing at the edge of it, me without knowing, for their entire lives. Part 4. Nicole Watterson and the weight she was born to carry. Let us talk about Nicole. Because Nicole might be the most quietly devastating character in this entire show. And most people miss it entirely because the show wraps her pain in comedy so consistently and so skillfully that you can watch her entire arc and never stop laughing long enough to feel what is underneath. On the surface, Nicole Watterson is the competent one, the breadwinner, the disciplinarian, the person who holds the Watterson family together through sheer force of will while everyone else around her causes varying degrees of catastrophic damage to their home, their neighborhood, and the fabric of local reality. She works at the Rainbow Factory. She can outrun sound. She can generate energy blasts in a fight. She destroyed the neighboring household in a martial arts exchange that would have been implausible in an action film aimed at adults. In a world of unusual characters, Nicole is the one you do not want to stand against. But here's the thing nobody talks about enough. Nicole is a woman who has been carrying the weight of an entire family, essentially alone, since she was a teenager. And the show gives us just enough of her backstory to make that weight comprehensible and then comprehensibly heartbreaking if you are paying attention. Season 5's episode The Choices is, I will simply say it, one of the best episodes of any animated series ever produced. It follows Nicole during one chaotic family dinner as she mentally revisits the decisions that brought her to this moment, tracing the alternate timelines that never happened. And what it shows us about where Nicole came from is devastating in its specificity. Her father, Daniel Senecourt, is a short-tempered cat who looks almost exactly like Nicole and shares her explosive anger. The show is not subtle about this lineage. He punched the engine out of his own car when he was frustrated. He had the same coiled tension in his body that Nicole carries, except in his case it was directed at his family rather than at their problems. Her mother, Mary, was a perfectionist who had already planned every moment of Nicole's future before Nicole had any say in it, mapping out her life in minutes and scheduling her success with a mother's crushing certainty. Mary criticized Nicole's perfect report card because it had a lowercase letter for female in the gender field. She told Nicole that being a girl was not an excuse. These people did not attend their own daughter's wedding. They received the invitation and misunderstood RSVP for the name of a Moldavian town and ended up there. Which is, simultaneously, one of the funniest things the show ever did, and a piece of retroactive canon that transforms an absence from something unambiguous into something more complicated. They meant to come. They got lost. They missed it. Nicole did not know any of this for 20 years. She stood at her wedding and looked at 2 empty seats and believed herself abandoned by the people who should have loved her most. Think about what that formative wound does to a person over decades. Think about what you build yourself into when the foundation of your childhood is the message that you are never quite enough, that there is always a higher standard you have not reached yet, that your achievements are prerequisites for love rather than reasons to celebrate. Nicole did not choose her perfectionism. She inherited it from a mother who treated it as survival. She did not choose her rage. She absorbed it from a father who treated the world as something to be subdued. She is, in many ways, the sum of 2 traumatic childhoods compressed into one person and pointed at the task of keeping a family alive. Her marriage to Richard tells you exactly how fully she understood, even without being able to articulate it, what she needed to heal. Richard is the gentlest person in Elmore. He is passive. He is warm. He is completely without ambition, utterly without the aggressive drive that defined both of Nicole's parents. He has never once demanded perfection from her. He has never pushed her. But he has never made her feel that she was not enough for him, because his love for her is the kind that does not come with conditions attached. She chose the antidote to her childhood. She chose with whatever instinct leads people toward the things they need, the one person who would never be her parents. But the cost of that choice is that she carries everything. Every bill, every crisis, every catastrophic consequence of a family that would, as the show demonstrates repeatedly and with increasing comic hyperbole, cause localized apocalypses if left unattended for more than a few hours. The pizza episode confirms this. Richard once triggered the collapse of local spacetime by attempting to deliver pizzas. The universe itself has a rule about Richard not having a job, and we will get to that. But the point here is that without Nicole, now the Watterson household does not function. It does not merely struggle. It ends. Her anger is not a character flaw. It is a pressure release valve on a system that was never designed to hold this much pressure. In an episode called The Painting, the school attempts to get Nicole to relax, and she literally cannot do it. She tries. She fails catastrophically. She goes insane attempting to be calm. The show plays this as comedy, and it is very funny. But underneath the joke is a woman whose nervous system was conditioned from childhood to interpret peace as threat. She does not know how to exist without a problem to solve because her entire formative life consisted of problems that she was expected to solve perfectly. Thus, there's a fan theory that floats around the community that Nicole has some unconscious awareness that Elmore is not quite real, that her paranoia and her inability to relax and her constant readiness for disaster come from some deep pre-verbal sense that the world she lives in is fragile in ways she cannot name. I do not know if the show intends that reading, but there is something to it. Nicole has always sensed how easily things fall apart. She has spent her entire life preventing the collapse that she can feel coming without knowing what it is. Her superhumanly combat-effective body is the physical expression of how much she has to hold. She is not strong because the show needed comedy. She is strong because the story needs her to be able to survive the thing she was born into. Now, the alternate timelines in The Choices are worth sitting with for a moment. If Nicole had followed her parents' plan, the show gives us a vision of her as a political tyrant, eventually a dictator, standing in front of architecture that evokes North Korea. The logical endpoint of a woman with Nicole's capabilities and her parents' conditioning, given absolute power instead of a family to love, is authoritarianism. That is not a coincidence. That is the show telling you exactly what love saved her from. Part 5. Gumball Watterson and the Performance of Existing. Now let us talk about the blue cat at the center of all of this. Because the theories surrounding Gumball himself are some of the most fascinating in the fandom, and a few of them are supported by the show in ways that make them feel less like theories and more like confessions. The most prominent and most carefully argued is this. Gumball subconsciously knows he is in a television show. Not fully, not consciously, but on some level that he cannot access or articulate, Gumball Watterson knows that he is a fictional character, and everything about his behavior reflects that knowledge. There is a piece of scholarship that the fan community has cited repeatedly in connection with this theory. An academic paper by economist Robin Hanson titled How to Live in a Simulation. The paper argues that a person who realized they were living in a simulation would exhibit specific behavioral patterns. They would be more self-serving. They would take reckless risks because the simulation might end at any moment. And most importantly, they would perform. They would try to be as interesting and entertaining as possible, because the more engaging they are, the less likely the simulation is to be switched off. They would essentially be constantly working to hold an audience they cannot see. That is Gumball. That is Gumball almost perfectly. He is impulsive. He is reckless in ways that seem almost strategic, not malicious, but self-preserving. He gravitates toward chaos. He inserts himself into situations and stories and dramas that do not require his presence, simply because being at the center of things seems to be, for him, something close to instinct. In The Others, a Season 4 episode, Gumball discovers that a classmate named Claire Cooper has her own life, her own problems, her own narrative. She has a story that does not involve him, and his reaction is genuine distress, not sadness. Distress. Existential unease, because if other stories exist, then his story is not the only one. And if his story is not the only one, it might not be the most important one. And if it is not the most important one, it might not be the one the world chooses to keep. He tries to insert himself into Claire's story. He tries to fix her problem. He tries to make her narrative about him because in Gumball's world, that is literally how existence works. Everything revolves around him because the show is named after him, and the existence of a story that does not need him is a kind of quiet existential violence. When Rob confronts him in the disaster and tells him that none of this is real, Gumball's response is denial, not genuine engagement with the philosophical implications, not curiosity, active, emphatic, almost panicked denial. He fights back. He refuses to accept it. Yet he clings to the reality of his world with a desperation that is either incredibly brave or incredibly sad, depending on how you interpret what he is afraid of losing. My personal reading of this theory is that Gumball is not consciously aware he is in a television show. But I think he is aware that something is wrong with his world. He notices the inconsistencies, the way things reset, the way injuries heal too quickly, the way people sometimes seem to already know who he is before they have been introduced. He knows, but he does not know that he knows. It is like having a word on the tip of your tongue, except the word is the name of everything that is wrong with your reality, and knowing it would destroy you. And then there is the Zack episode. In the name from Season 3, we learn that Gumball's legal name is not Gumball, but his legal name is Zack. Gumball was a nickname that stuck, and when his actual given name comes to light, an alternate personality, Zack, begins emerging. Zack is everything Gumball is not. Cool, confident, aggressive, self-serving, without the fundamental sweetness that makes Gumball who he is. The family literally goes to court to change his name back to Gumball to save him from being consumed by Zack. The dark reading of this episode is that Gumball, the lovable, chaotic, fundamentally kind protagonist we have been watching, is not the original personality. He is the override. The real kid, Zack, was suppressed or replaced by a personality more suited to the cartoon he inhabits. Gumball is, in some sense, a character who has been written over his own identity. He is a persona that replaced a person. This is not even covert meta-commentary. Bockley designed Gumball as a blue cat, but the original concept for the show had the character as a black cat. The original pitch was about rejected characters at a remedial school, and the Gumball we know emerged through revision after revision of that concept. The Gumball who exists is already a revision of a revision. So when the show tells us that Gumball's real name was something else, and that the Gumball we love is a constructed identity, it is doing something more pointed than a typical character episode. It is telling us something about what happens to characters when stories get rewritten, about who survives the revision and who gets folded into the void. Part 6. Darwin and the Question of Selfhood. Darwin Watterson is the heart of the show. He is sweet, loyal, endlessly kind, morally perceptive in ways that routinely shame the rest of the cast, and genuinely one of the most lovable supporting characters in the history of animated television. He is also, if you think about it for more than a minute, one of the most existentially disturbing characters in children's programming. Here is what we know about Darwin's origin. He was the family goldfish. A regular, non-sentient goldfish in a bowl. Actually, not even the first goldfish. He was one of a series of replacement goldfish because the previous ones kept dying. One day, Nicole and Richard were startled by him suddenly speaking, and in the shock, they accidentally flushed him down the toilet. He was swept through the sewers of Elmore and eventually made his way back to the Watterson house. The journey through the hostile, dangerous city transformed him. Yeah, he grew legs. He developed lungs that could breathe air. He developed speech, emotion, consciousness, love. He evolved from a fish into a person over the course of a single desperate journey through sewers and traffic and predators and dehydration. The show's explanation for this transformation is the power of love. Gumball loved Darwin so completely and refused so thoroughly to give up on him that Darwin evolved to meet that love. It is sweet. It is heartwarming. The Origins two-parter from Season 4 made me cry the first time I watched it, and I am not embarrassed to admit that. It is also, when you look at it, without the emotional warmth obscuring the mechanics, deeply unsettling. What happened to Darwin was not evolution in any biological sense. It was transformation. The universe, or the narrative force, or whatever governs what becomes possible in Elmore, looked at a fish that a family loved and said, "This needs to be a character." And it made him one. It gave him everything a sidekick needs: loyalty, optimism, moral clarity, emotional availability. It built the perfect companion for the protagonist out of a pet goldfish, and it did it because the story needed him to be there. This raises a question that is quiet and persistent and never goes away once you have heard it. Is Darwin real? Is his personality genuinely his own? Is his kindness something he arrived at through the accumulation of experience and the development of a self? Or was it assigned to him when the universe decided he needed to be a character? He was a fish. Fish do not have moral frameworks. Fish do not love their siblings. So fish do not choose to be the kind of person who cares deeply about the feelings of others. Everything Darwin is, every quality that makes him Darwin, was given to him. And if everything you are was given to you by a force outside your control for reasons outside your understanding, are you actually you, or are you a role being performed by an organism that used to swim in circles? The show occasionally pokes at this in ways that are genuinely uncomfortable. In The Roots, there is a subplot about whether Darwin should be returned to the wild, to the ocean, to the environment he biologically belongs in. The family struggles with the idea that maybe Darwin was never supposed to be part of their world. Maybe he would be happier as a fish. Darwin insists he belongs with the Wattersons, but the episode leaves an unease behind it. But the sense that Darwin is caught between two kinds of existence and fully belongs to neither. In The Puppets, which is the crossover episode with the series Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, Darwin is the one who gets controlled. A puppet takes him over and tells him directly that he is not really alive. He is just a character in a show. And Darwin's reaction is terror, not confusion, not philosophical curiosity. Terror. Pure primal animal fear. As if the puppet said something he already suspected and had been trying not to know. Here is the dark theory that has stayed with me. What if Darwin's unwavering positivity, his absolute devotion to Gumball and the Watterson family, his relentless optimism in the face of everything, is not his personality? What if it is his programming? The narrative needed a sidekick, a loyal companion, a moral anchor. So it took a goldfish and gave it exactly the traits a sidekick requires. Darwin is not optimistic because he naturally sees the best in people. Darwin is optimistic because that is what his character needs to be. And the moments when that optimism falters, when Darwin gets genuinely angry or genuinely afraid or genuinely lost, are the moments when the fish peeks through the character. He was forced into personhood by love and necessity, and nobody ever asked whether he wanted it. Part 7. The Broadcast That Keeps Them Alive. Season 4's The Signal is an episode that functions, in retrospect, as one of the clearest mission statements the show ever made about its own nature. And it accomplishes this with the casual confidence of something that knows it can afford to be obvious because its audience will assume it is just being weird. The premise is simple on its surface. Gumball and Darwin are having a normal day, but reality keeps stuttering. Sentences get cut off mid-word. Scenes jump forward without transition. Gumball tries to say one thing, and something completely different comes out of his mouth. The visual style of the show keeps breaking down, interspersing live-action footage, random commercial snippets, other animation styles, as if the broadcast is losing coherence. As if someone is channel surfing through the middle of their story. Gumball notices. He feels something happening to the fabric of his reality. He tries to articulate it. The episode cuts him off. He tries again. The episode glitches forward. He is on the verge, multiple times, of saying that he and Darwin are in a television show. And every time, the reality of the episode intervenes to prevent the words from being fully formed. The wonderfully weird world of Gumball confirmed what this episode was always about. If Gumball discovers the truth, the void returns. The signal was Elmore almost killing itself by accident. The glitch was not random interference. It was the signal degrading in a way that was about to give the characters access to the understanding that would destroy them. The world's self-preservation mechanism cut them off. It skipped ahead. It made sure they stayed just far enough from the truth to survive. Think about what this means for the experience of being a character in Elmore. You exist on a frequency, that your reality is a broadcast. If the transmission quality drops enough, you start to perceive things you were not meant to perceive. You start to feel the edges of the container you live in. And the container, in order to preserve itself, scrambles a signal before you can fully process what you are seeing. You feel it, and then you do not know what you felt, and the world moves on, and tomorrow, the sun comes up again and the chaos of middle school life resumes as normal. Except the signal is still fragile. The glitch is still possible. And somewhere in every character's experience, in Gumball's reckless performances, and Darwin's desperate loyalty and Nicole's relentless competence, there is the body's memory of having come close to something it cannot look at directly. There is another episode that pushes at this from a different angle. As the Test is a Season 5 episode in which Gumball takes an online personality quiz and discovers he has been categorized as the loser of the sitcom, the butt of the joke. The character who exists to make other characters look better by comparison. He tries to change. He tries to be less of what the quiz told him he was. And the moment he stops performing his assigned role, Tobias fills it. The show literally transforms into a different show, a cheesy, laugh-tracked sitcom with Tobias as the protagonist, because nature abhors a narrative vacuum. If Gumball will not be the loser, someone else has to be. If no one performs the function the story requires, the story imports someone who will. Gumball has to reclaim his role by leaning into it, by being exactly what he was told he was, by unleashing all the awkward, impulsive, chaotic energy that defines him, and in doing so, restoring the world to its proper shape. He survives by being himself, by performing himself, which in Elmore amounts to the same thing. The episode ends with a revelation that the whole thing was Tobias's dream, which is played as a joke about lazy sitcom writing, but it raises a genuinely vertiginous question. Dreams within dreams. Stories within stories. If Tobias can dream an entire episode into existence, what layer of fiction are we on? And what exactly is doing the dreaming? Part 8. The Joy and What It Says About Happiness in Elmore Season 3, Episode 4. The Joy. I want to spend time here because this episode is, in my opinion, the most important horror episode the show ever produced. And I do not use the word horror loosely or for dramatic effect. This is a horror episode. It just happens to be a children's cartoon about weaponized happiness. The setup is simple. Gumball and Darwin are grumpy on a Monday. Richard, trying to cheer them up, gives them what he calls a wonder hug. A hug filled with all the love and happiness in the world. The embrace causes a rainbow mushroom cloud to detonate out of the Watterson household. And when the boys arrive at school that morning, they are smiling. Smiling in a way that is immediately, unmistakably wrong. Miss Simeon, watching on the school's security monitors, sees their faces and knows. Something is wrong with those smiles, and she is the only one who knows it. What follows is 11 minutes of survival horror that would be impressive in an adult genre piece and is staggering in a children's cartoon. The episode references Resident Evil, 28 Days Later, Quarantine, Cloverfield, Left 4 Dead. It commits to the genre completely. Found footage timestamps, security camera angles, the gradually building dread of watching a contained space fall to an unseen pathogen. It is technically accomplished horror filmmaking compressed into an 11-minute episode format, and it is genuinely frightening. The joy virus works like this. Stage 1 is uncontrollable happiness. The infected cannot stop smiling. They heel-click involuntarily. They auto-tune their speech. Their hearts stop and then restart on a rainbow ECG. Stage 2 is the coughing up of rainbow-colored fluid. Stage 3 is becoming a hugger, a zombie-like creature driven by a single compulsion. They retain enough memory to be specific about it. Gumball is a hugger pushing Banana Joe aside specifically to hug Penny, because his feelings for her persist even through infection. But they have lost agency. They have lost themselves. They can only spread the condition. The cure, Miss Simeon discovers, is depressing music. Specifically Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, because the virus feeds on happiness and is neutralized by sadness. In a world infected by joy, grief is the medicine. Miss Simeon spends the episode navigating the infected school, pretending to be a hugger, disguising herself among the smiling, rainbow-drooling creatures who used to be her students and colleagues. She almost makes it. She gets to the principal's office. She almost saves everyone. And then she passes Banana Joe in the hallway. His banana peel is unzipped, violating the dress code. And Miss Simeon, who has been a teacher for 2 million years by the show's internal timeline, who has been conditioning students about dress codes longer than human civilization has existed, cannot stop herself. In the middle of a zombie apocalypse that hinges on her remaining invisible, she reaches out and zips up his peel. She enforces the rule. The infected see her. The episode ends with Miss Simeon recording herself on a camcorder as the virus takes her, rainbow liquid filling her mouth, her last words a cheerful, terrified announcement that this story has come to a happy ending. And then the show never mentions it again. This is one of the darkest narrative choices in the series. There is no resolution. There is no morning after scene. Miss Simeon was infected. The school was overrun. The apocalypse happened. And then the next episode started fresh, and the world was fine, and nobody acknowledged what had occurred. And the reset kicked in, as it always does, and wiped the slate. But here's what this episode is actually saying. Think about what the joy virus represents thematically. Happiness is weaponized. Joy, the thing every character in Elmore is supposedly chasing, the thing the comedy format promises you, becomes a contagion. It strips away identity. It replaces personality with compulsion. It turns feeling into performance, and then it forces the performance on everyone else. The infected are not happy. They are imprisoned in a simulation of happiness that they cannot escape and cannot communicate their suffering from within. They smile and they laugh and they drool rainbow and they are in agony. The only defense against this kind of happiness is sadness. Real, authentic grief. The Moonlight Sonata. Something that does not perform? That simply is what it is. The Joy episode is the show saying very directly that mandatory positivity is indistinguishable from a disease, that forced happiness is a zombie apocalypse, that the only healthy response to a world that demands your smile is to find a piece of music that hurts and let it hurt you. In a show about a world where characters must be entertaining to survive, this is a very particular kind of terror. Part 9. The supporting cast and their hidden griefs. We could spend the rest of this and several more conversations digging into every character in Elmore, because every character in Elmore is hiding something. But let us move through some of the most important ones, because the pattern is everywhere once you start looking for it. Richard Watterson is the easiest character in the show to underestimate. He is the bumbling dad, the Homer Simpson archetype, the lovable oaf who means well and causes catastrophe. He sleeps, and he eats, and he watches television, and he periodically causes the laws of physics to malfunction by accidentally caring about something. He is comic relief within a show that is already entirely comic relief. Except there is an episode called The Job. Richard gets hired as a pizza delivery man. And the moment he starts actually working, doing the job with competence and dedication and genuine productivity, reality begins to tear. The sky cracks. Buildings warp. Physics stops making sense. The universe literally cannot handle Richard Watterson having a job. Gumball, Darwin, and Nicole have to race against time to get him fired before the fabric of space-time collapses entirely. The show presents this as a joke. Ha! Richard is so lazy that the universe depends on him staying lazy. But read that again. With the frame we have been building throughout this entire conversation, it means the universe has designated a role for Richard. His role is do nothing. Stay home. Be the gentle, useless, emotionally available father who makes home feel like safety. And if he deviates from that role, reality itself will punish him and everyone around him until he returns to his assigned function. Richard is not lazy by choice. He is cosmically imprisoned. Every time he tries to grow, to contribute, to be something more than what his role allows, the world destroys itself to stop him. He is trapped not by his own limitations, but by the narrative function he was created to fill. He cannot escape the role any more than a character in a film can step out of their genre. And his backstory makes this even sadder. We know from various episodes that Richard's mother, Granny Jojo, protected him so completely from the world that he never developed the skills to function in it. We know his father, Frankie, was a con artist who abandoned the family. Richard grew up with a mother who would not let him become an adult, and a father who modeled what adults do as something to run from. He never had the tools to grow up. And then the universe looked at what he had become, this warm and gentle and perpetually childlike man, and decided that this is exactly what it needs from him. The universe took his greatest wound and made it his cosmic purpose. He is also, it should be said, one of the best fathers in the show. He is present, he is warm, he plays with his children, he is emotionally available in ways Nicole, exhausted from carrying everything, sometimes cannot be. He gives the Watterson children something that neither he nor Nicole received as kids. A parent who is simply there. Not demanding, not performing, not absent, just there, loving them, being ridiculous with them, being the soft place to land. The episode The Hero makes this explicit, and it is one of the most quietly moving things the show ever did. He breaks the cycle. Not his own cycle, he cannot escape that, but his children's. He makes sure they do not inherit the wound he carries. Now let us talk about Penny Fitzgerald, because Penny's arc is layered enough that it deserves more time than most discussions give it. Penny starts the show as a mystery, an anthropomorphic peanut with antlers who wears a shell, the same shell her entire family wears, and a hard exterior that contains and controls whatever is underneath. For 3 seasons, Penny and Gumball circle each other in mutual paralysis, each feeling something they cannot say. In Season 3, during a school play, Gumball accidentally cracks Penny's shell, and what emerges is not another peanut. It is a shapeshifter, a fairy, a being whose physical form is entirely determined by her emotional state. When she is happy and confident, she is luminous and winged, something that looks like it was drawn by someone who loved the idea of what a person could be. When she is afraid and self-loathing, she is a monster. Something massive and dark and destructive because her fear and her shame and her self-doubt express themselves immediately and visibly and without any possibility of concealment. Her father's reaction to this is fury. And he calls her unstable. He tries to put the shell back on. He tries to send her to a different school. He does everything in his power to contain her. And Penny runs. She transforms into the monster she believes everyone sees when they look at her, and she runs through Elmore while Gumball chases after her. And Gumball catches up to her, and he looks at whatever her self-hatred has made her into in that moment. And he does not flinch. He does not try to fix her. He does not tell her to calm down or cover up or be different. He tells her he likes her, not in spite of what she is, because of it. And she transforms. She becomes the fairy, the beautiful, glowing, impossible thing she always was beneath the shell. The show eventually reveals through the revival series that the Fitzgerald family's shell tradition has a history. The family wears shells, not just to protect themselves from the world, but to protect the world from them. For generations, they were told that their true nature was dangerous, that they needed to be contained, that showing the world who they really were was an act of aggression. And so they built a culture of concealment and called it safety. They passed it down like an heirloom, each generation telling the next that their emotions were a threat, that feeling fully was irresponsible, that the shell was protection. Not a prison. Protection. Penny was the first Fitzgerald in her entire lineage to refuse this inheritance, to say that the shell was not protecting her but preventing her. And the cost was her father's anger, her family's disruption, the world confirming her worst fears about herself by chasing her through the streets with pest control. She chose visibility over safety. She chose the risk of being seen fully over the certainty of being seen never. That is not a children's cartoon plot. That is one of the most honest things I have ever seen a cartoon do. Now let us talk about Larry Needlemeyer, who is one of the most underappreciated figures in this entire show. Larry is a supporting character who appears in almost every episode. He works at every store in Elmore. He is the cashier at the supermarket, the attendant at the gas station, the manager at the pizza place, the usher at the movie theater, the vendor at the ice cream truck. He holds 38 different jobs simultaneously, by his own count in the schooling. He makes $7 an hour. Yeah, the show confirms in the night that Larry never sleeps. He is always working. The episode The Pizza reveals what Larry means to Elmore. He has been mistreated and disrespected and overlooked for years. And one day, he has had enough. He quits. All 38 jobs. At once. And the town collapses. Not metaphorically. Literally. The commercial infrastructure of Elmore falls apart completely. Society descends into chaos. Every service stops. The economy fails. Because Larry Needlemeyer was the single point on which the entire functioning civilization of this town depended. Think about Rob. Rob was erased for being too useless to exist. Larry is enslaved for being too essential to be allowed to stop. They are the inverse of each other. In Elmore, you either matter so little that reality removes you, or you matter so much that reality will not release you. There is no comfortable middle. There is no version of this world where you just live. A fan theory suggests that Larry works all those jobs not because of work ethic, but because of terror. He has seen somehow what happens to characters who do not have a function. He knows what the void takes, and so he has made himself so necessary, so omnipresent, so thoroughly embedded in every corner of Elmore's daily life that the universe could not possibly justify removing him. He is working himself beyond the limits of biology because existential security is worth any cost. Except security is not what he has. He has survival. He has endurance. He is not safe. He is just too useful to destroy. He will work forever. He will never rest. Never. He will fill every role that needs filling because the alternative is becoming the kind of nothing that gets sent away. That is not a life, that is a siege. Let us spend a moment with Carrie Kruger, because Carrie does not get nearly enough attention in dark theory discussions. Carrie is a ghost. She has been dead for an unspecified long time. She floats through Elmore Junior High and makes sarcastic comments and loves horror films and is, eventually, Darwin's girlfriend. She is the goth friend, the spooky one, played for a kind of deadpan comedy that the show is consistently excellent at. She is also a dead child who goes to school with living children, who watches her classmates grow and change and experience things she will never experience, who cannot eat food without possessing someone else's body to taste it through, and who cannot touch things in the normal way, who is permanently a kid who never got to grow up, trapped in the social landscape of middle school for what may be eternity. Darwin will age. Carrie will not. Darwin will eventually grow up and leave school and build a life. Carrie will still be there, floating through the same hallways, making the same sarcastic comments, watching another generation of 12-year-olds discover themselves and move on. Their love story is real, and the show handles it with genuine tenderness. It is also a love story with a structural tragedy built into it from the beginning. Darwin gets a life. Carrie gets forever. The show never tells us how she died. We know her father had a villainous past. We know she has been a ghost for a long time. We know she wanders the halls of a middle school as a permanent resident of the age she was when she stopped living. But the cause of her death, the show leaves completely blank. I think the blankness is intentional. Knowing would make it too real. It would force us to confront the fact that a child died. And instead of finding peace, instead of moving on, that child ended up here. In a cartoon. Making jokes about being dead. And then there is Anais, who is 4 years old, who is in class with children several years older than her, who has skipped grades because of an intelligence the show positions as exceptional and funny and occasionally a plot device. Anais, who speaks multiple languages and understands advanced mathematics, and has the analytical capacity of someone 3 times her age, and who is, if you watch carefully, on the loneliest character in the show. She is too smart for kids her age and too young for the kids in her class. Her combination of intellectual intensity and the desperate, all-in attachment style of a very young child who wants desperately to connect drives people away from her. She tries to make friends in multiple episodes, and her earnestness and her clinginess and her inability to play the social games that older kids navigate instinctively sabotage every attempt. In The Friend, she creates an imaginary friend because the real ones do not work out. The imaginary friend turns out to be terrifying and violent, which the show plays as absurdist comedy. But the fact that her imagination filled her loneliness with something aggressive and destructive is not nothing. So there's a theory that Aeneas is the character most at risk of being sent to the void, not because she is boring, but because she is noticing things. She is the one who questions the logic, who points out the inconsistencies, who raises the philosophical questions in Oracle about determinism and whether seeing the painting caused the events rather than merely predicted them. She is 4 years old, and she is asking whether free will exists. She is going to keep pulling on the thread until she finds what is at the end of it. And in Elmore, finding what is at the end of the thread means finding the void. She is smart enough to figure it out and young enough that nobody will take her seriously when she does. She is the ticking clock that the show has not yet addressed. The question of what happens when Anais's curiosity finally assembles all the pieces is one of the most interesting, unresolved threads in the entire mythology. Part 10. The Mixed Media World and What It Means to be Mismatched. Before we reach the end of our conversation tonight, I want to spend time on something that sits underneath all the narrative theories and philosophical implications and illuminates all of them from below. I want to talk about how this show looks, and why the way it looks is itself a theory. The Amazing World of Gumball is one of the most visually unusual shows ever produced for television. The backgrounds are real photographs. The characters on top of those backgrounds are animated in every technique available. Two-dimensional hand-drawn figures, three-dimensional computer-generated objects, stop-motion creatures, puppets, a live-action chin turned upside down with googly eyes applied, characters from different eras and traditions and technological generations, all occupying the same photographic space. Bacale has spoken about wanting the show to feel real, about being influenced by the idea of cartoon characters in a tangible physical world. And visually, that goal was achieved. But the side effect of that visual choice is that every character in the show is constantly, unavoidably, obviously out of place. Not one of them matches the photographic world they live in. Not one of them matches each other. They coexist without fitting together, which is of course the point and the source of much of the comedy. But it is also a visual metaphor that runs deeper than most people think. Consider this. Well, the characters who are rendered in the most traditional two-dimensional animation style are the Watterson family and their closest circle. Gumball, Darwin, Nicole, Richard, Anais. They look like what you expect from a cartoon family. And they are the center of the narrative. They are the reason the show exists. The further you get from the Watterson family, the more stylistically diverse the characters become. Tina Rex is fully three-dimensional, rendered in a different physical dimension than the main characters. The Robinsons look like puppets, stiff and tactile and slightly off. Idaho is claymation, with the physical weight and solidity of stop motion. Sussy is live action, the most radical departure, a real human chin in a world of drawings. This creates a visual hierarchy that mirrors the show's thematic hierarchy. Less proximity to the protagonist determines how real you are, how smooth and coherent your existence feels, how much care and rendering goes into making you visible. The closer you are to the center of the narrative, the more complete your reality. The further you drift toward the margins, the more your existence starts to look like it was built from a different kind of stuff entirely. And when the void begins consuming Elmore in the Inquisition, it does not look like a typical cartoon apocalypse. It looks like the components separating, like the photographs and the drawings and the CGI figures are being peeled back into their individual categories. The coherence that made Elmore work as a world is undone. The unlikely harmony of all those mismatched styles dissolves, and what remains is static, television static, by the same static that Rob is made of, the same static that fills the void, the same static that Banana Barbara paints when she tries to see the future. It is all the same thing: the visual design, the character arcs, the existential horror. It is one continuous statement about what holds things together and what happens when they come apart. Part 11. The Grand Unified Theory and the audience at the center of it. We have been building towards something all night. Something that ties all of these individual threads into a single, coherent, deeply unsettling truth about what the Amazing World of Gumball was doing across its entire run. And that truth is this: Elmore is a television show within a television show. The characters are aware on varying levels that they are fictional. The void is cancellation. The world exists only as long as someone is watching. And every character's behavior, their constant comedy, their relentless entertainment value, their inability to be boring or to have a quiet day, is an unconscious survival mechanism designed to keep the audience engaged and therefore to keep them alive. The show does not hide this. It confirms it explicitly, repeatedly, across multiple episodes, and in the explicit mythology of the revival series. Rob knows he is fictional, and it is the source of his entire arc. The universal remote controls reality like a television remote. The void runs end credits when someone is ejected into it. The signal episode shows the broadcast literally degrading in a way that affects physical reality. Now, the Inquisition features Rob trying to turn characters into live-action humans to get them to the other place, our world, the real world, so they can survive when Elmore ends. And the rewrite confirms the stakes. If Gumball discovers he is fictional, the void returns. If the show gets canceled, the void returns. Both conditions produce the same result: the end of everything. Elmore is not just a place, it is a broadcast, an ongoing act of transmission that requires an audience to sustain it, which means we are part of this, not metaphorically. Within the logic of this show's mythology, the audience is not a passive observer of Elmore. The audience is the reason Elmore exists. Our attention is what keeps the signal going. Our engagement prevents the void. Our decision to keep watching is the act that prevents cancellation. Every time you chose to put on an episode instead of something else, you were Basquiat. Within this mythology, keeping a fictional world alive. This is not a comfortable thought. It is a thought that puts the comedy in a different light. The show's constant chaos, the relentless entertainment, the fact that every episode contains multiple crises and nobody ever gets to simply have a quiet day, this is not just a genre convention. It is the world performing for you, keeping you engaged, making sure you do not change the channel, making sure the signal holds. There is a character named Sarah G. Lotto who is, within the show's world, an obsessive fan of Gumball and Darwin. She writes fan fiction about them. She follows them around. She inserts herself into their stories. She is the in-universe audience, or the character who exists to represent the viewer. In the fan, she is portrayed as creepy and intrusive, someone who does not understand the difference between caring about a story and possessing it. But in the test, she is the most rational character in the episode, the one who understands narrative structure better than anyone because she has been studying it from the outside. She is us. She is the person watching Gumball's life for entertainment, and the show has complicated feelings about that. It needs her. It needs us. Without the audience, there is no show. Without the show, there is no Elmore. Sarah's watching sustains the world. Our watching sustains the world. And that is a strange and intimate thing to be told by a cartoon late at night when the lights are low and the silence outside has gotten thick. Now, there's a character named the Shady Man, also known as the van shopkeeper or the owner of the Awesome Store, who operates at the edges of Elmore selling mysterious items that consistently have narrative significance. He gave Rob the universal remote. He sold various cursed objects that drove individual episodes. He exists at the fringes, never fully explained, operating by rules that are different from everyone else's. The fan theory, and the rewrite seems to confirm this, is that the Shady Man is a meta-character, someone who exists outside the normal rules of Elmore. He is not a citizen. He is more like a game master. He distributes plot devices. He sells MacGuffins. His van is called the Awesome Store, and the things in it are always narratively significant. If the theory holds, but the Shady Man is one of the most powerful entities in Elmore because he is the one who ensures interesting things keep happening. His entire function is to keep the world from becoming boring enough to be deleted. He is keeping Elmore alive by keeping it full of story. By making sure there are always new complications, new objects, new reasons for the characters to keep doing things worth watching. He is the invisible author within the text. The person who fills the world with narrative fuel and then drives away in a mysterious van. Think about what that means in the context of everything else. The characters dance to survive. The shady man keeps the music playing, and somewhere out there, an audience watches. And as long as we watch, the static stays back. The signal holds. Elmore keeps existing. By part 12. The static that stays at bay. I want to bring this home with something I have been thinking about all night. Something that I think is the most honest thing this show ever said. Every character in the Amazing World of Gumball is dealing with a version of the same fear. Not the fear that is specific to their circumstances. Not Nicole's fear of becoming her parents, or Rob's fear of being erased, or Darwin's fear that his personality is not really his, or Penny's fear that her true self is monstrous. Those are the specific expressions. The fear underneath them is the same in every case. It is the fear of not mattering, the fear of being forgotten, the fear that your existence does not justify itself, the fear that if you stop being useful, stop being interesting, stop being worth something to someone, the world will carry on without noticing the space you left. The fear that you were never necessary. This is not a cartoon fear. This is one of the most fundamental human fears there is. Every therapist knows it. Every philosopher has touched it. Every person who has ever lain awake at 2 in the morning, thinking about whether any of it means anything, has felt this exact thing, in this exact hollow place in the chest. The Amazing World of Gumball built an entire mythology around it. The void is the fear made physical, cancellation made architectural, the deletion of the unnecessary made into a dimension that hums with television static and swallows the forgotten whole. And the show's answer to this fear, its ultimate statement, is not that the fear is wrong. It does not tell you that you definitely matter, that you definitely will not be forgotten, that the void will definitely not come. It knows better than to promise that, because the void is real in the show and in its symbolic form in the world. Things end. People are forgotten. Stories stop being told. The answer the show gives is something as smaller and more honest than a reassurance. It is Gumball, chaotic and impulsive, and I'm maybe deeply frightened underneath all of it, choosing every single day to throw himself into the mess of his life with complete commitment. It is Nicole channeling her inherited wound into love instead of control. It is Darwin walking on brand new legs through a city that could have killed him because the alternative was never getting home. It is Penny taking off the shell even though everything she was taught told her that visibility was danger. And it is Rob choosing, in the end, to protect people who will never know he did it, because the value of the thing he saved is greater than the credit he will never receive. The static is real. The void is always close, but right now, in this moment that you are in, wherever you are and whatever time it is, the signal is holding. The world is still here. The story is still being told. Banana Barbara was right that the future might be nothing. She was right to paint the static, but she painted it at the end of a wall full of paintings that all came true, which means she was also the one who documented everything that happened before the static. Every moment of chaos and love and comedy and heartbreak. She kept the record. She witnessed it all. And that is, I think, what this show was always doing. Not promising survival. Not guaranteeing meaning. Just witnessing. Just documenting the stubborn, ridiculous, magnificent effort of being alive in a world that might not last. Just saying, here is what it looked like. Here is what it felt like. Here is what we did with the time we had before the signal died. We are still watching. The signal is still holding. And for tonight at least, that is enough. Thank you for staying with me through all of this. I mean that genuinely. This conversation was one of the ones I have wanted to have for a long time, and the fact that you are here for it means more than I know how to say properly. If something tonight resonated with you, something stuck, something surprised you about a show you thought you already knew, please leave a like. It helps more than you might expect, and it keeps this channel alive in a very literal and practical sense. Subscribe if you have not yet. Every subscriber is another set of eyes keeping the signal going. We cover the amazing world of Gumball here in depth, and there is so much more to get into. The movie that Ben Bacalé is still working toward. The continuing mythology of the wonderfully weird world of Gumball and what it means for the larger story. individual episodes that deserve their own deep dives. The philosophical architecture that makes this one of the most deceptively dense shows ever made for any audience. For tonight, though, let the world be quiet. Let the static stay at the edges where it belongs. And if you wake up tomorrow having dreamed about a blue cat and a talking goldfish navigating the end of their world, just know that somewhere, Shaw Banana Barbara is painting, and the future is not static yet. Good night. Watterson lore. Deep dives into the world of Gumball. Appendix, the smaller theories that still keep the lights on. There are more threads to pull on in this show than any single conversation can fully exhaust. And I want to spend the remaining time touching some of them, because collectively they build into something larger than any individual theory could. Let us start with Richard Watterson, who I mentioned earlier, but who deserves more time than I gave him. Because Richard is hiding in plain sight as one of the most philosophically interesting characters in the show, and the comedy conceals the depth of what the show is doing with him so effectively that most casual viewers never find it. Richard is characterized as lazy, catastrophically, legendarily, cosmically lazy. He is the sloth given form, the platonic ideal of domestic inertia, a man whose relationship with the couch has evolved beyond mere preference into something approaching spiritual commitment. He sleeps and he eats and he watches television, and he occasionally causes localized apocalypses through sheer incompetence. This is his thing. This is what Richard does. But there is a Season 2 episode called The Job, where the show reveals something extraordinary about what Richard's laziness actually means in Elmore. Richard gets hired as a pizza delivery driver. He approaches the job with genuine enthusiasm. He does it well. He takes responsibility seriously. And as he begins actually fulfilling the role with competence and productivity, reality starts coming apart. The sky cracks, buildings warp, the laws of physics begin violating themselves. The universe, in a very literal sense, cannot handle Richard Watterson having gainful employment. Gumball, Darwin, and Nicole have to race across Elmore to get him fired before the entire fabric of space-time collapses around them. The show plays this as a comedy about how disastrously lazy Richard is. But that is not what the episode is actually about. It is about the fact that the universe has a designated purpose for Richard, and that purpose is to not have a job. Richard's inaction is not a character flaw. It is a cosmic mandate. His laziness is a law of physics, and every time he tries to deviate from it, every time he attempts to be something the universe has decided he is not, reality itself violently enforces his return to the assigned role. Think about what that means for a person. Not for a comedy character, for a person. You have a self. You have aspirations. You have, why, presumably, some internal sense of what you could be or what you would like to become. And every time you try to reach toward any of that, the world around you literally breaks. Every step toward growth causes the environment to punish you and everyone near you. Every attempt to be something more than what you have been declared to be produces catastrophe as a direct consequence. You are not being lazy. You are being kept in your box by forces that will destroy your family if you push against the walls. Richard's backstory fills this in with specificity that makes it actively sad. His mother, Granny Jojo, protected him so completely and so suffocatingly throughout his childhood that he never developed the tools to function as an adult. She would not let him do anything. She shot down his dreams. She maintained him in a state of perpetual childhood through smothering overprotection. And his father, Frankie, who the show introduces in later seasons, was a con artist and an absent figure who demonstrated through his behavior exactly what adult men do, which is run away. Richard grew up with a mother who prevented him from becoming, and a father who modeled becoming as abandonment. No wonder he is the way he is. He was never given the ingredients for a different version of himself. And then the universe looked at what these circumstances had produced, this warm and gentle and fundamentally childlike man, and decided that this is exactly the function it requires from him. The universe took his deepest wound, the arrested development caused by his mother and the absence of his father, and enshrined it as his cosmic purpose. It is like being told that the only thing you are allowed to be is the thing your most painful history made you. Forever. Except here is the thing about Richard that the show keeps returning to. and that I think is the most important thing about him. He is, by almost every measure, a wonderful father. He is present. He is warm. He plays with his children. He is emotionally available in ways that Nicole, exhausted from carrying everything, sometimes cannot be. He gives the Watterson children something that neither he nor Nicole had growing up: a parent who is simply there, not demanding, not performing expectations, not absent, just there, being goofy, being ridiculous, but being the soft place to land after everything else has been hard. In The Hero, Gumball and Darwin accidentally mock Richard for being useless. He overhears them. He is devastated in a way the show plays with enormous gentleness. And the episode becomes about the boys realizing that Richard's uselessness, his constant presence at home, his willingness to be the butt of the joke, his cheerful acceptance of his own limitations, is not just an absence of contribution. It is a specific and irreplaceable kind of contribution. In a family where the mother can break the sound barrier and the pressure to perform is immense, Richard's gift is his absolute non-pressure. He makes it safe to fail. He makes home feel like home. And the universe will not let him be anything more than that, which is its own kind of tragedy. The universe looked at this man's greatest gift and decided it was his entire identity, and then built walls around it to make sure he never becomes more than the container for that one thing. There is one more character in this specific universe of parental tragedy that I want to touch on before we move into the final section, and that is Hector Jotunheim. Hector is the giant, the enormous student at Elmore Junior High who cannot fit inside most classrooms, who participates in school life from outside windows and doorways, a massive and gentle presence at the margins of everything that happens inside. His mother is the one who controls his situation, and she controls it with an iron specificity born from genuine fear. If Hector experiences strong emotions, his size makes those emotions dangerous. Not metaphorically, physically dangerous. But a giant child feeling things is a giant child capable of destroying everything in range. His mother has taught him to suppress everything: happiness, sadness, excitement, fear, anger. Any strong feeling is a structural risk. Any authentic emotional expression becomes a civic emergency. So Hector has learned over his entire life to keep everything inside, to feel nothing strongly, to exist at the emotional temperature of mild neutrality, because anything warmer might bring the walls down. He is the show's most explicit metaphor for what it does to a child to be told that their feelings are dangerous. Not that their behavior is dangerous, not that certain expressions of feeling are inappropriate, that the feelings themselves, the actual experience of emotion, is something the world cannot safely contain. And every kid who was told they were too much, too loud, too emotional, too intense, finds some version of themselves in Hector. The message was the same. Turn it down. Keep it in. Control yourself. Because if you feel it fully, you will break something. The difference is that in Hector's case, the metaphor is literal. He actually will break something. His feelings will actually cause damage. And so his mother is not simply being cruel. She is doing what love looks like when it has been filtered through genuine fear. She is doing her best. And her best means her son grows up in a world where being himself is the most dangerous thing he can do. Now let us take a moment for a few of the smaller theories that enrich the larger picture. There is the theory about Alan the Balloon, who is the nicest character in the show. Relentlessly, unbreakably nice. In The Saint, Gumball and Darwin spend an entire episode trying to find the breaking point of Alan's kindness. They subject him to increasingly terrible things. He remains cheerful. He forgives immediately. He finds the positive interpretation of everything. He cannot be made to stop being nice. The dark reading of this is not that Alan is genuinely kind. It is that Alan is performing kindness because he knows that is his role. He understands, on some level, the mechanics of Elmore. He knows that characters with clear, positive, stable functions are safe. He knows what happens to characters who lose their function. And he has decided that being the nice kid, the irreplaceable embodiment of optimism, is his insurance against the void. He cannot afford to be less than perfectly kind, because his kindness is what keeps him real. In the trailer, the show reveals that Alan is actually quite strategic and calculating underneath the niceness. He can be manipulative. He can be ruthless in subtle ways. The nice guy act is exactly that, an act. And within the framework of our larger theory, that revelation is deeply sad. Alan figured out the game years ago. He knows what this world rewards and what it deletes. And he plays the required role with the precision of someone who understood from a very young age that there was no other choice. There is the theory about Clayton, the shapeshifter, who compulsively lies about everything. He changes his appearance and his story and his identity constantly. He is never the same thing twice. But the dark reading is that Clayton lies because he has no idea who he is underneath the performance. He became a shapeshifter for a reason, and that reason is that there is nothing stable at the center of him. He does not have a self to present, so he presents other selves. New ones every day. He is the ultimate identity crisis. A character so uncertain of his own reality that he constructs new ones constantly because the alternative is having to confront the emptiness at the middle. And then there is Sussy. Sweet, strange, impossible Sussy, who is a live-action human chin filmed upside down with googly eyes, dropped into a world of animated characters. She is the most visually alienating character in the show by a significant margin. Other characters find her unsettling. Nobody quite knows what to do with her. She does not fit the visual grammar of the world she inhabits. She is made of a completely different kind of stuff than everyone else. The fan theory about Sussy is that she is from our world, a real human, or a representation of one, who somehow ended up in Elmore. She is so alien to the animated universe that the world does not know how to categorize her. She sits in the permanent, uncanny valley between the real and the drawn, belonging fully to neither. She is the audience-made character. She is us somehow, looking in at the cartoon world and being looked at in return. And if that reading holds, Sussy's existence is the show's most direct acknowledgement that the wall between fiction and reality is much thinner than anyone in Elmore or anywhere else wants to believe. Now, there's the episode called The Downer from Season 2 that I think might be the most accurate depiction of depression in the history of children's animation. Gumball wakes up and everyone is gone. The house is empty. Elmore is deserted. The entire world has cleared of people. At first he thinks this is wonderful, freedom and solitude, no obligations, no chaos. But as the episode progresses, the emptiness stops being peaceful. It starts being suffocating. The familiar places become alien. The silence becomes oppressive in a way that ordinary silence never is. And eventually the episode reveals that Gumball is experiencing a depressive episode, that the empty world is his depression externalized, that the other characters did not leave, that he simply cannot feel them anymore. The color drains out of the world. Now the places he knows become places he no longer recognizes. The isolation does not feel like freedom. It feels like abandonment by everything. And the show does not treat this as a problem to be solved with the right lesson. It treats it as a state. Something that happens. Something the main character experiences and then eventually comes out of. Not because of a dramatic realization, but because that is how these things work. They come and they go. And in between them, you keep going. For a children's show to depict that accurately, without sensationalizing it, without neat resolution, is something worth noting. Gumball, our impulsive and energetic and chaos-generating protagonist, can go to the place where the world goes quiet and empty. Nobody is immune. Not even him. The episode called The Others takes this from a different angle. Gumball discovers that a classmate he has never really noticed, a girl named Claire Cooper, has her own life, her own problems, her own narrative. And Gumball is fascinated, then uncomfortable, then genuinely threatened. Not physically, existentially. If Claire has her own story, then his story is not the only one in Elmore. And if his story is not the only one, then the universe is not structured around him the way he has always assumed it is. And if the universe is not structured around him, then what is protecting him? He tries to insert himself into Claire's story, to make her problem his problem, to become the protagonist of her narrative as well. Because in Gumball's deep structure, being the center is not just a preference, it is survival. The show is not exactly wrong about this, but being the protagonist is what keeps you from being the background character who gets sent to the void. Being necessary to the story is what keeps you in the story. His behavior in the others is not selfishness in the ordinary sense. It is an unconscious survival mechanism operating on rules the show has been establishing since season 3. The episode ends with Gumball learning something approaching humility, with him acknowledging that other people's stories are real and valid and do not require his participation. The lesson is gentle and the show delivers it with its usual warmth. But the undertone is there. Sharing the spotlight is a kind of death in a world where the spotlight is what keeps you alive. He is generous in the others. He is also, underneath the generosity, afraid. So let us also spend a moment on the episode called The Finale, which is the season 2 finale and which does something extraordinary. It asks, what would happen if the episodic reset stopped working? What if all the consequences of everything the Watterson family has ever done, all the property damage, all the chaos, all the injuries, all the disruption, suddenly came due? The answer is lawsuits. Every citizen of Elmore arrives with a grievance. Larry has been damaged professionally and personally dozens of times. The school has suffered countless incidents. The neighborhood has been destroyed and rebuilt and destroyed again. The city has borne costs that no city should have to bear. And the Wattersons cannot argue. It all happened. They know it happened. The evidence is there. So the episode is the show acknowledging its own structure and calling it unjust. The episodic reset, the convention by which each episode starts fresh and previous damage is simply absent, is not just a narrative convenience. It is a form of systemic injustice. The Wattersons cause harm, and the universe lets them escape accountability episode after episode, while the people they hurt have to simply absorb it and pretend nothing happened. The reset privileges the protagonists and burdens everyone else. And the finale makes this explicit. It stares the audience directly in the face with the implications of the format they have been enjoying. Your entertainment was funded by the suffering of background characters who had no recourse. The resolution, such as it is, involves the universe resetting again anyway. The slate gets wiped. The memory is erased. And in the next episode, everything is fine, which is perhaps the darkest punchline in the show's history. It acknowledges the injustice and then demonstrates that the injustice is structural, inevitable, and perpetual. The reset is not a bug. It is a feature. And the characters who live in its aftermath, who absorb the consequences and then wake up the next day with no memory of having absorbed them, are the ones who have no say in the feature's design. Now let us talk about the episode called The Money, because it is the one that connects the existential mythology most directly to the material reality of how television actually works. In The Money, the Watterson family runs out of money, and as their financial situation deteriorates, the show itself begins to decay. Product placements appear in dialogue. The animation quality visibly drops. Characters start endorsing things mid-conversation. The visual world of the show starts selling itself to survive. The degradation of the family's finances produces a direct and literal degradation of the show's production quality. This is the show pulling back the curtain on the economics of its own existence. A television show needs money to be produced. It needs advertising revenue, corporate sponsorship, the ongoing commercial investment of a network that has determined the show is worth continuing to fund. And if those things disappear, in Elmore's logic, the show does not just become lower quality. The world itself becomes less real. The commercial underpinning of the production is the same as the existential underpinning of the world. When the money goes, the world goes. Do the characters exist because they are commercially viable? Their reality is that in the most direct possible sense, market dependent. Every character in Elmore is fundamentally an economic unit. They exist because someone decided they were worth investing in. They continue to exist because they generate a return. And the void is what happens when the market decides you are not worth it anymore. That is capitalism rendered as existential horror in a show rated for children. And the show knows exactly what it is doing with that particular juxtaposition. There is a contrast the show uses that I think is worth noting explicitly. Masami Yoshida, the cloud girl whose father owns the rainbow factory where Nicole works, represents a completely different relationship to the void and to existential security. Masami is wealthy. But her family is extraordinarily wealthy. And in the logic we have been building, there is something quietly pointed about the fact that Masami does not seem to need to perform for her survival the way everyone else does. She manipulates the weather with her emotions. She gets what she wants through the indirect application of her family's power. She does not have to be interesting. She does not have to generate story. She can simply exist, backed by the financial infrastructure of the Rainbow Factory, while Larry works 38 jobs for $7 an hour and Rob scrambles for an identity that will keep him from being erased again. The economic parallel to our world is not subtle. It is just delivered in a way that makes you laugh before you fully register what you are laughing at. Final thoughts before the night ends. I want to return, at the end of all of this, to where we started. To Banana Barbara and her wall of paintings and her flat, quiet, devastating declaration that the future is nothing. We have spent considerable time tonight going through the architecture of what the amazing world of Gumball was really doing. The void as cancellation. The characters performing for an audience they cannot see. The meta-awareness that kills. The generational trauma running through every family. The cosmic imprisonment of people who were assigned roles they did not choose. The existential horror of a world that looks cheerful from the outside and turns out, on examination, to be navigating constant low-grade existential emergency. And I want to be careful here about what we take from all of that, because the dark theories are real. The implications are genuinely dark. But the show is not a dark show with comedy pasted over it. It is a show that understands at a fundamental level that comedy and existential dread are not opposites. They are the same experience observed from different distances. You laugh because it is funny. You cannot sleep because it is true. And the best work, the work that stays with you, makes you do both at the same time. The Amazing World of Gumball is full of moments that balance these two things in ways I have rarely seen any creative work manage. Gumball's panic in the others is funny and frightening simultaneously. Miss Simeon zipping up Banana Joe's peel in the middle of a zombie apocalypse is genuinely hilarious and also a perfect encapsulation of how patterns of behavior survive even the most catastrophic circumstances. The joy is horrifying and absurd in equal measure, and you cannot separate the two. The show knows you will laugh. The show is counting on you to laugh. And it embeds the darker reading inside the laughter so that you carry it with you without having to decide whether to carry it. What the show ultimately says, I think, after all the theories and all the darkness and all the meta-awareness and all the existential architecture, is something both very simple and very brave. It says, keep going. Keep being alive in a world that might not last. Keep loving people who might not remember you tomorrow. That keep finding the comedy inside the horror. Not because things are definitely fine, they might not be, but because the alternative is the void, and the void is just the absence of everything you would have had if you had chosen to be there. Gumball is reckless and impulsive and maybe deeply frightened, and he keeps throwing himself into the middle of everything. Darwin chose to be a person, even though being a person means uncertainty and pain, that being a fish would have spared him, and he keeps choosing it every day. Nicole carries more than any one person should carry, and she keeps carrying it because her family needs her to. Rob was declared worthless by reality itself, was physically deformed trying to escape it, was forced into a role he never wanted, tried to save a world that could not hear him, and fell into oblivion, and came back, and chose in the end to be the protector nobody knows about. Because the world he is protecting matters more than the recognition he will never receive. These are not just cartoon stories. They are arguments. Arguments for the value of showing up, for the practice of continuing, for the strange courage it takes to be a small creature in a large universe that may or may not consider you necessary, and to say, I am here anyway, I am interesting anyway, I am worth the signal I take up. The void is always close, the static is always one bad signal away from swallowing everything. But right now, in this moment, the signal is holding. The world is still here, you are still here, and that is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. Banana Barbara said there is no future. She painted the static, and she was painting what she saw. But she also painted everything else. She painted the chaos and the love and the comedy and the heartbreak. She kept the record. She witnessed the whole thing, so did you. That is what watching is. That is what you did tonight. You witnessed Elmore. You kept its signal going for a little while longer. And as long as you do that, as long as any of us do, the story is not finished. Sleep well tonight. The static is just background noise. It always has been. If you've made it all the way here, I genuinely cannot thank you enough. This script was one of the longest, most personal things I have made for this channel. The fact that you stayed for it matters to me more than I know how to say. If something tonight stayed with you, if a theory landed or a character made more sense or the show opened up in a new way, please leave a like. Now, it helps the channel more than most people realize. Subscribe if you are not already here so you can catch every deep dive. And share this with someone who loves Gumball and has never stopped to ask what it was really about. This is Watterson Lore. We will be back soon. Good night. The things the show quietly confirmed. I want to take a final pass through some of the specific connections between these theories and what the show itself has now confirmed, because the wonderfully weird world of Gumball, which released its first season in July 2025 and its second season in December 2025, has been methodically validating things the fandom suspected for years. The rewrite, which serves as both the Season 2 finale of the Revival series and the resolution of the original series' 6-year-old cliffhanger, is the single most explicit confirmation the show has ever given of its own mythology. In it, Gumball and Darwin begin noticing plot holes, not narrative inconsistencies in the casual sense. Actual structural impossibilities. Their bedroom window should face one direction based on the stairs they climb to reach it, but it looks out onto the front of the house. They have not had a birthday in 7 years. Their voice actors have changed without in-universe explanation. The events of the Inquisition, where Rob disguised himself as Superintendent Evil and transformed classmates into humans, left a literal hole in the floor of the school that reality smoothed over the way it smoothed over Molly's absence. But Gumball found the seam. Rob, now working as the owner of the awesome store under the guidance of the Shady Man, is watching. He knows what happens if Gumball and Darwin trace that thread to its conclusion. He knows because the Shady Man told him. If the boys discover they are fictional, the void returns and consumes everything. The awareness itself is the trigger. Knowledge is the apocalypse. So Rob spends the episode trying to stop them. He and the Shady Man literally rewrite the script of the episode in real time, inserting obstacles, redirecting the plot, using narrative authority to prevent the narrative from being examined too closely. It does not work. The boys are too curious. The thread leads where it leads. And in the end, Rob does the only thing left to do. He deliberately falls back into the void, pulling the attention and the crisis with him, sealing the gap, giving Gumball and Darwin something to react to that does not lead them to the truth. Now, he sacrifices his presence in the world, again, to protect the world from knowing what it is. The Shady Man pulls him out. As always, they drive away. Elmore is safe. Nobody knows what just happened. And Rob has chosen, consciously and deliberately, the role of the invisible protector. The character who is defined by being forgotten will spend his remaining existence ensuring that nobody remembers what he is doing for them. Because if they remember, if they ask too many questions, if they pull on the thread he just sealed, the void comes back. He went from nothing to villain to prophet to martyr to guardian. And the final version of him, the most complete version, is the one where nobody knows he is there. This was confirmed as winning the Best TV and Media for Children Award at the 53rd Annie Awards in early 2026. Now, the industry recognized what the episode accomplished. A children's revival series used its season finale to deliver one of the most emotionally coherent character resolutions in recent animated history for a character who started the entire series as a background figure nobody could remember the name of. Ben Bacalé, when asked about the larger mythology and what the void really represents, has maintained a studied vagueness. He has said he has his own theory, which he will not reveal. He has said the story is part of something larger. He has said, with the particular lightness of someone who knows exactly what they are not saying, that things are not quite what they seem, and at the 2025 Annecy Festival, he confirmed that the Void storyline would be addressed by Gumball and Darwin in the 7th season. and that what was originally intended for the movie was instead being handled in the rewrite. He also mentioned in a December 2025 interview that Rob's family history and deeper motivations would be explored in the eventual film, which remains in development but has not yet been greenlit for a new platform following its complications with Max. What Bakalay's deliberate silence tells us is not nothing. It tells us that the show's creator is aware of the philosophical territory his show mapped out. He knows what the void represents. He knows what Rob's arc says about fictionality and consciousness and the terror of being declared a mistake. He built it, and he has chosen to let the audience keep finding it, keep building on it, keep connecting the dots, rather than collapsing the mystery into a single definitive statement. Some answers would diminish the question. Some silences are their own kind of answer. The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball is already in production for seasons 3 and 4, following a renewal announced in December 2025 ahead of the second season premiere. 40 additional episodes, adding to the 40 already delivered. The signal is holding, at least for now. Elmore keeps existing. And somewhere in a van parked at the edges of town, Rob is watching, quietly, making sure nothing goes too wrong. There is something worth acknowledging about the show's historical context, now that we have the perspective of time and the revival series' confirmation of its mythology. The Amazing World of Gumball premiered on Cartoon Network in May 2011. It ran through 6 original seasons and ended without the resolution its creator intended, and in June 2019. Those 8 years of production sat inside a period of significant turbulence in children's animation and broadcast television more broadly. The landscape of what a children's show could be and do was changing dramatically. Shows were increasingly serialized. Shows were increasingly willing to go to emotional and philosophical places that earlier generations of children's programming would have considered inappropriate for the audience. Adventure Time, Gravity Falls, Steven Universe, Over the Garden Wall. All of these were happening in the same era, and all of them were in their own ways asking children to think about big things. About identity, about loss, about the nature of reality. Gumball was doing this too, but in a way that was deliberately disguised. It wore its comedy more completely over its philosophy than almost any of its contemporaries. You could watch the entire show as pure comedy and have a wonderful time and never feel like you missed anything essential. The layers were genuinely optional. But for those who found them, they were there, consistent and coherent, across every season, building toward a mythology that the show's creator had planned from the moment he designed the overarching plot that would run all the way to the ending. In that Squiggly Animation magazine interview, Bakalay said something that stays with me. He was talking about the mixed media visual design, about wanting Elmore to feel real, about being influenced by Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And then he said that he had designed an overarching plot that would run all the way to when the show finally finished. So he said he was building towards something. He said the mysterious nature of why everything looks the way it does in Elmore was going to be developed and explained. He said this in a casual, almost offhand way, as if it were just a production note. But what he was describing was the deliberate construction of a mythology. He was telling anyone listening that the show had a destination, that the meta-awareness and the existential horror were not accidental, that the whole thing was pointing somewhere. We know now some of what that somewhere was. The void as cancellation, the characters as fictional entities performing for an audience they cannot see. The awareness as destruction, Rob as the character who discovered this truth and spent his entire arc living inside it. These were the planned elements, the bones of the architecture Bakalay was building toward. And there is an additional dimension to this that the revival series has gently surfaced. The show named its family after Bill Watterson, who let his creation end when it was finished. But the show itself, through the Wonderfully Weird World revival, has made a different choice. It has continued. The story is still being told. New seasons are ordered. The signal persists. And within the mythology of the show, that continuation matters. Every episode made is another episode preventing the void. Every season renewed is the universe deciding that Elmore is still worth keeping around. The meta-awareness of the show, its understanding of what cancellation means for the characters who inhabit it, extends to the real-world history of the show's own continuation. The revival is not just a narrative event. Within the logic of Elmore's mythology, it is the world getting a second chance. The static held off for a little longer. The signal returned. That is a genuinely beautiful thing to contemplate. A show about the terror of cancellation got canceled for 5 years in practical terms, with no resolution, with the villain falling into oblivion and the world left in ruins, and then came back. The void receded. The broadcast resumed. Elmore got to exist again. Maybe that is the most hopeful version of what the show is saying. Not that the void will never come, not that the static will never win, but that even if it does, even if everything goes dark for a while, sometimes the signal comes back. Sometimes the story gets to continue. Sometimes the ending turns out not to be the ending after all. Bye, banana. Barbara said there is no future. She painted what she saw. And in the moment she painted it, looking at the static on her canvas, she was right. The future was empty. The void was coming. And then, 6 years later, the future happened anyway. And it was weird and bright and loud and full of Gumball causing problems in a world that really cannot handle him. And it was exactly what it was always supposed to be. The static was not the end. It was an intermission.